the big news is coming out of San Francisco. Brandon Aiyuk, who's been in a contractual dispute longer than the weather's been hot here. This thing goes back, it feels like 3 years at this rate. Requested a trade. The Niners really in no position to trade him. I haven't really looked into the contract thing too much. There's a good piece in The Athletic looking at their 3 options, and one of them is basically just tell him to kick rocks, which I still think is the most likely outcome here. Do you think they actually trade him?
No.
I don't think so either.
No, I don't think they trade him. I don't think they should trade him. I think he's a guy you like. I think you prioritize keeping a guy like that around, right? He's only 26.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It looks like he's 26.
Yeah, and he. I just think he is. I think he's underrated. To be honest with
that's
you.
one thing I did not realize. I started to dive into this.
Yeah, he's a good player.
The problem, and I think if you give everybody involved truth serum, like I do wonder if like the problem with this entire squabble is like the 49ers, and I think Shanahan makes all those decisions, probably values his system so highly and values what they've built there and the scheme and things like that he probably looks at it as like your success is a byproduct of what we're putting out there and what we're putting you in. But you do, I was kind of blown away. Like looking at, I think it was in the Athletic story. There was one of these like scatter charts of, I think it was PFF grading for separation plus something with like yards after catch. And
he's way up in the top.
He's
right.
up in the top right with Tyreek Hill. It's like
just look for those. Just look at the top right.
Yeah, and not to mention too, this is huge in that system. Great blocker. At least that's what everybody says. I did not crush the tape for this, I will say. But so you look at that and it's like you just from a general takeaway, you're like, yeah, I can see why this guy wants money. It is kind of funny. We talk about the odds. That's kind of what we do here. Like 20 players have shorter odds to lead the NFL in receiving yards this year. He's 80-1 to win Offensive Player of the Year at FanDuel. There's 31 players with shorter odds than him. Like, I do think he's probably he was 6th in the NFL in yards per route run last year. I do think he's underrated, but like whether you're talking about his contractual value or the betting board, it does feel not fair, but it kind of makes sense. So, I don't know.
Well, here's the thing, right?
It's I love him on my team, but.
So the 49ers are right now co-favorites to win the Super Bowl with the Chiefs.
Yep.
6-1. It's pretty clear they're all in for this year. Mm-hmm. So, isn't that incentive enough to just to the initial point, like just tell them to kick rocks and you're playing under this contract and that's it. We're going for it this year.
In these situations,
what are you gonna get? Like, what are you gonna trade him for?
The teams have the leverage, right? Like,
100%. And but it's not a situation where they're maybe a middle of the pack team, and it's like you trade them for draft comps. So that's the other thing too, right? Drafts is come and gone, and I understand they spent the first round pick on a receiver, so maybe you're accounting for down the road. I think that was probably more anticipating Debo maybe leaving after I think he's contracts through next year, but I just don't see what would be a rational trade on their end because. You're probably doing it for something that can help you win the Super Bowl this year, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if that trade exists. I saw one idea kicked around. It was what if you traded Aiyuk for Joey Bosa?
I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah, it was in that Athletic story. Yeah,
just the idea being that just you address another position of need or a position you want to bolster.
Just weird. I don't think pass rusher is necessarily a position of need for them, but
right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great hockey trade.
Which I talk through it, I'm like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I would love that. The Bosa boys in San Francisco. I think giving him to Harbaugh and Herbert would be kind of sick too. He is the perfect Jim Harbaugh player, right? Where he blocks, he can run immaculate routes, et cetera, et cetera. But that's fantasy land when you start talking about these contracts and the way that they're structured. It's very hard to make the money work, or it's very hard to match contracts. And you're talking about one guy who's in a situation where he's ready to get paid or something's coming up, and then there's another guy who just got paid, and it's very difficult to move.
That's the other thing too with this, right? If you're the 49ers, it's you. I mean, Brock Purdy's making about $1 million this year, and so that whole contract situation is coming down the pike pretty quickly. And like, what do you do then? Like, I think they have 7 players making $15 million a year or more, which is tied for the highest in the NFL. So like, they're not necessarily in a crunch right now, but like looking ahead, you're getting into one. So, but if I look at that from like an age, skill, importance to the offense, like Aiyuk's one of the pieces I want to build around. I'm figuring out what to do with the other guys. What do you do with Deebo Samuel like, are we gonna look back maybe starting like next year or the year after and be like, maybe they shouldn't give Christian McCaffrey all that money? It's like he blew away every running back in terms of contracts. So I don't know. We had this conversation a few weeks ago about how important wide receivers are.
Everything's cyclical. Yeah, no, it is. He's a super interesting for the same reason that Purdy is interesting, where it's, again, I think system based, and there's a lot around him that makes his job a little bit easier.
I don't want to go on a complete tangent here.
Okay.
But like, they could be in a bad spot with Brock Purdy. Like, if he comes out and he's just kind of mediocre this year,
he might stink.
But then you're looking at like a New York Giants situation where like you almost have to pay Daniel Jones, in this case Brock Purdy, because like you can't just give up.
The worst thing that could happen is if he's kind of mediocre league average and then gets like hurt too. Like, that was the thing with Daniel Jones, is that you had to like make a decision without.
There's still like an unknown sort of variable there that like you're paying under the idea that like, well, maybe once this guy's back up and running at full strength, he's going to be worth it.
The more I think about the 49ers, this is the rubber is ready to meet the road. Like, they kind of have to do it this year, because I have to imagine like the patience with various the process related things is going to start running thin, where there's mounting evidence that Shanahan in big games is not the best in-game coach, or smaller games even. So like, and then the contract stuff. So all this stuff is going to come to a head sooner than later, and they've got to kind of figure out who they want to keep for the long term. That's why I guess if you're looking for any bit of leverage for Aiyuk, maybe it's that. But the whole thing, the window is, if it's not closing, I think we've unlocked it to kind of push it down.
It's a big year. Just more 49ers odds, plus 290 at FanDuel Sportsbook to win the NFC. Second shortest odds, the Lions at 6-1. So pretty big gap there in terms of like where they stand relative to the rest of the NFC. If you want to look at the NFC West, they are minus 195 to win the division. The Rams then are plus 330, Seahawks plus 750, Cardinals 12-1.
All right.
So, just a little 49ers talk for you.
This is, like you said, it's the middle of summer.
What did they do, trade him, though? Where does he go?
Yeah, so one of these offshore accounts, I think it was a sportsbetting.ag, sent out Brandon Aiyuk next team odds. And so the Steelers are the favorite at 4-1. Shout out Pittsburgh. Jacksonville 6-1. The Colts 7-1. The Commanders 8-1. The Chargers, the aforementioned Chargers 9-1. Patriots and Cardinals 10-1. And then you got like the Bills in there, the Giants. You look at that list and you're like, going back to the conversation about should they trade him, will they trade him? What are the Patriots going to give you that you're going to be like, yeah, let's make this deal? What are the Commanders going to give you?
Yeah.
Or even the Colts going to give you? Like, that's one thing where if you have, if your intention is to win right now, maybe you look at it and like, we can get by without him, and yes, we'll take draft compensation while we still can, but you almost kind of have to make a hockey trade where it's a player for player. You know what I mean? And you look at those teams, it's like, I'm not sure what you can get for that asset. I hate calling players assets, but I don't know. I like, if I were to make a bet here, I might look at like the Jets at 20-1 and just say, like, if they strike out on Devontae Adams or something like that, maybe they get weird and do it.
Yeah.
But the rest of this list, it might as well just be a dartboard.
It is like, there are so many variables that go into it, because then it's like, to go back to the contract stuff, like, teams got to have the cap space to give him the extension that, like, you're going to have to give him that monstrous extension as part of this. Like, that's, you're not just going to get him and he's going to play it out. So you need that. You need the talent or the draft capital to give up. Your competitive timeline, like that, like, he's 26, so it doesn't like, I guess, even if you don't intend on contending this year or even next year, like, he's in theory should be around for a little bit. But just another thing to sort of factor in. Also, like if you're a team like Pittsburgh, you said they have the shortest odds.
Yeah, 4-1.
Like that's a team that if they do one thing well, it's they churn out wide receivers at a pretty good clip. Like do they need to give up assets to bring in a guy like Aiyuk or
no? Because and they're also
like
kind of early on in this rebuild. I don't see their
I have faith in them to draft one like next year.
Yeah, I don't see
after.
their quarterback of the future on the roster right now either. Like unless you really believe the Justin Fields reclamation project. I don't know.
In that case,
they just drafted
you're
Roman
gonna have to
Wilson.
pay him.
Like they drafted Roman Wilson out of like Michigan. And I think it was like 3rd round pick. He's gonna be an All Pro in 2 years at this rate. So like I don't know.